It began with a plume of ash so immense, so violently thrown into the sky, that for a moment the world seemed to pause and stare upward. A distant roar echoed through the barren lands of Ethiopia's afar region, a sound so deep it vibrated through bone and soil alike. People living in scattered desert communities looked up in shock, watching the sky turn from blue to a bruised gray, as if daylight had suddenly been swallowed. The ground trembled beneath them, livestock panicked, and a thick shadow rose from the horizon like a towering ghost awakened after an age-long sleep. That was the moment the world realized that something extraordinary had awakened, a giant that had been silent for nearly 12,000 years. The Hayli Gubbi volcano, a name unknown to most of the world until that morning, had erupted without warning. No modern human civilization had ever witnessed this mountain come alive. No written record, no tribal memory, no scientific dataset predicted what was unfolding. Yet in a single violent breath from beneath the Earth's crust, the volcano shattered the illusion that dormant meant harmless. The ash column shot tens of thousands of meters into the atmosphere, so high that aviation authorities across the region issued immediate red alerts. Villagers described the sound as a sudden bomb, a thunderous eruption that shook the air. From satellites orbiting hundreds of kilometers above Earth, the plume appeared like a colossal white spear, piercing through layers of the atmosphere and drifting toward the Red Sea. Moments later, planes were rerouted in midair. International flight paths were abruptly redirected away from the spreading ash cloud. Airlines from the Middle East, India, Pakistan, and parts of Africa halted operations, grounding hundreds of passengers. Meteorological agencies tracked the ash as it drifted across Yemen, over the Arabian Peninsula, and toward the Indian subcontinent. The world watched as a volcano that human memory had long forgotten suddenly declared its existence in the loudest way possible. For the people of the Afar region, the eruption was more than a geological event. It was a moment of fear, awe, and confusion. Communities accustomed to droughts, sandstorms, and the harshness of desert life found themselves witnessing a force far older and more powerful than anything they had known. Thick ash began coating their homes, their water sources, their grazing lands. The air grew heavy with the scent of sulfur. Some villagers crouched near their livestock, shielding their animals from falling debris. Others fled toward safer grounds, unsure of what the earth beneath them would do next. And yet, as local communities faced the immediate shock, the scientific world was thrown into a different kind of turmoil, one filled with questions that demanded answers. How could a volcano remain dormant for over 12 millennia and then suddenly erupt with such violence? What had changed beneath the East African rift? Did scientists miss the warning signs? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, if Hayli Gubbi could awaken after so long, what does that mean for the dozens of other dormant volcanoes scattered across Africa's most active tectonic region? The eruption did not merely shake the ground. It shook confidence in the predictive models that geologists and monitoring agencies rely upon. It exposed the limitations of monitoring remote regions like Afar, where political instability, rough terrain, and sparse populations have historically prevented the installation of advanced seismic and geodetic instruments. Scientists around the world immediately began reviewing satellite data recorded months before the eruption, searching for clues, thermal anomalies, subtle ground deformation, tremors too faint to be detected by distant stations. In hindsight, a handful of faint thermal signals had been detected in the region earlier in the year, but they were not strong enough to raise alarms. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, experts wonder whether those signals were the early whispers of the giant waking up. The eruption forced the world to reconsider the nature of dormancy itself. A volcano silent for 12,000 years, a time frame stretching back before recorded history, had suddenly burst forth. In geological terms, that silence is the blink of an eye. In human terms, it is nearly forever. Civilizations have risen and fallen, empires built and destroyed, yet this volcano had remained quiet through it all, waiting for a moment deep within the Earth's shifting plates to realign in just the right or wrong way. What unfolded in the hours after the eruption was a cascade of global reactions. From Addis Ababa to New Delhi, from Dubai to Karachi, aviation alerts spread rapidly. Ash in the upper atmosphere poses one of the greatest dangers to aircraft engines, capable of shutting down turbines mid-flight. Pilots received urgent rerouting instructions. Weather satellites captured stunning but alarming images of the ash cloud stretching across the Gulf of Aden. Environmental agencies warned that depending on wind patterns, ash could continue drifting for days, possibly affecting air quality in several countries. Meanwhile, global news outlets rushed to report on what had happened. Photos published by Ethiopian authorities and international media showed remote Afar villages blanketed in ash, with residents wrapped in shawls to protect themselves from breathing in fine particles. The first testimonies began to emerge. "The ground shook like an earthquake," one villager said. "We have never seen anything like this." Another described livestock stumbling through ash-covered fields, disoriented by the sudden darkness that descended in the middle of the morning. Scientists monitoring the East African rift quickly held emergency meetings. The rift is one of the most geologically active regions in the world, responsible for slowly tearing the African continent apart. This is the same system that one day, millions of years from now, could split Africa into two separate landmasses. But to have a volcano with no recent eruptive history suddenly awaken here, at a time when global tectonic activity already appears to be shifting in various regions, raised tensions among geologists. Some spoke of rising magma pools, others of deep-rooted tectonic stress, still others of gases trapped beneath the crust for millennia suddenly finding an escape route. But for the people of afar, these scientific explanations mattered little in the immediate aftermath. They faced more pressing concerns. Would ash contaminate their scarce water supply? Would the eruption trigger more seismic activity? Would another explosion follow? Could their livestock survive in conditions where grazing land was now coated in toxic dust? As night fell, the glow of the volcano illuminated the sky, a haunting orange reflection that danced across clouds of ash. The eruption was a reminder not only of the power of nature, but of the fragility of human life in the face of forces beyond control. The ground wasn't just shaking anymore, it was breathing. A deep, rhythmic pulse rose from beneath the earth, like the heartbeat of a giant awakening after thousands of years. Animals fled, birds vanished from the sky, even the wind fell silent as if nature itself was holding its breath. And then a thunderous roar split the air, not like an explosion, not like a storm, but like the earth itself was tearing open. The volcano erupted. A column of molten fire shot into the sky, a tower of orange, red, and blinding white, rising kilometers high. Ash turned day into midnight within seconds. The sun disappeared behind a swirling black cloud filled with lightning that crackled like electric veins. People in nearby villages ran, covering their faces as hot ash rained down like burning snow. Houses shook, windows shattered. The ground cracked open, swallowing roads and splitting farmland like paper. Lava began to flow, slow but unstoppable. A glowing river of destruction, melting everything in its path, trees, metal, stone. Nothing stood a chance, yet even in the chaos there were heroes. Emergency workers fought through the ash, guiding families to higher ground. Scientists radioed warnings, predicting the lava's path as fast as they could. Mothers carried children in their arms. Men wrapped wet cloths around their faces and helped neighbors escape. But the volcano was not finished. Suddenly, a massive shockwave blasted outward, a pyroclastic surge, hotter than fire, faster than any human could run. It raced down the mountainside like a gray hurricane of death. And in that moment, the world finally understood this was not just an eruption. This was history repeating itself, a reminder of the planet's true power. As ash blanketed the afar region like a dark, suffocating winter, the world's leading geologists, volcanologists, and seismic analysts rushed into action. But behind their calm public statements, they were panicking, because what they were seeing should have been impossible. In underground labs from Addis Ababa to Paris, computer models were flashing red. Satellite feeds from NASA, ESA, and private Earth monitoring agencies showed the same terrifying pattern. Magma was moving in places it had no business moving. A dormant volcano awakening after a few centuries is rare, but after 12,000 years, that is not rare. That is unprecedented. And the eruption was only the beginning. Deep beneath Ethiopia, under the crust, sensors detected a violent surge of molten rock racing through the East African rift, the same tectonic scar stretching from the Red Sea to Mozambique, a place where Africa is literally splitting into two new continents. To the scientists, it suddenly made sense. The volcano didn't just wake up, it was pushed awake. Something massive was happening under the tectonic plates, a shift, a tear, a pressure release that had been building for millennia. Hours after the eruption began, international research centers held emergency calls. And for the first time in years, specialists who normally disagreed on everything were united in fear. One volcanologist put it bluntly during a leaked conference call. If this pressure chain continues, we are looking at a geological event we are not prepared for. Even regional governments went silent. Within the first 24 hours, seismic stations recorded over 1,200 small earthquakes, many occurring in a straight line extending north toward Djibouti and south toward Kenya, the exact path of the rift. This wasn't a local eruption, this was a continental symptom. And then came the second blow. Satellite scans showed the ash cloud rising so high, tens of thousands of meters, that commercial airlines instantly rerouted. Jets already in mid-flight across the Red Sea and Arabian Peninsula abruptly changed direction. Flights between Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, and Europe were grounded. Air traffic maps showed chaotic zigzag patterns as pilots scrambled to escape the river of ash drifting rapidly toward Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Pakistan, and India. One aviation meteorologist described it as a volcanic shadow sweeping across the skies. But the part that truly shook the scientific community was not the ash, not the lava, not even the eruption. It was what happened next. A seismic anomaly, a deep tremor, larger than anything ever recorded in the Afar region echoed through the crust. It wasn't an earthquake, it wasn't volcanic tremor, it was something new. A sound captured by low-frequency sensors, vibrating through the crust like the growl of a planet revealing its secrets. A frequency so low, you couldn't hear it with your ears, only machines could translate it. Some scientists described it as tectonic breathing. Others gave it a darker name, the awakening. But for the people living in Afar, this wasn't theory, this was survival. Roads collapsed, lakes boiled. Fissures opened beneath villages, splitting the earth into jagged trenches long enough to swallow entire homes. Many residents said the ground rippled like water. And still, the volcano roared. Nobody could answer the one question echoing around the world. Why now? Why after 12,000 years? What forced this sleeping giant back to life? Scientists were running out of answers, and the Earth was running out of patience. But perhaps the most defining moment of any eruption is not the moment the volcano explodes, nor the moment the world sees the images circulating online. It is the moment after the ash begins to settle, when humanity is forced to look directly at the consequences of an event that cannot be reasoned with, negotiated with, or postponed. In this stage, the eruption reveals its true magnitude, and the story shifts from spectacle to survival. The invisible challenges begin, quietly and relentlessly, long after the public's attention has moved on. In the immediate aftermath, the landscape appears frozen as if time has stopped. Entire regions draped in ash look like they have been transported to another planet, gray, muted, stripped of color and sound. At first glance, it seems eerily calm, almost peaceful. But beneath that thin blanket of volcanic ash lies a complex and dangerous reality. Every grain of ash is jagged, abrasive, and chemically reactive. It contaminates water supplies, compromises soil, destroys crops, and damages engines, roofs, and electrical systems. People walk cautiously, knowing that what feels like soft dust is, in reality, microscopic glass. Farmers stand outside their homes, looking at fields that once supported entire families and communities. Hours earlier, those lands were green and growing. Now they resemble barren deserts. Cattle wander confused, their grazing grounds unrecognizable. The livelihood of thousands collapses not because of lava or fire, but because of a powder so fine it can travel across continents. And yet, these are only the first visible signs of the disruption. Health services begin to report a different threat: ash inhalation. Volcanic ash, unlike everyday dust, is a razor-sharp irritant capable of causing severe respiratory problems. Hospitals and clinics already burdened see an influx of people struggling with breathing issues, eye irritation, and skin reactions. Doctors hand out N95 masks as quickly as they can, knowing there aren't enough. Children and the elderly become especially vulnerable. The question that emerges is no longer, what happened? But rather, how will we endure what happens next? Infrastructure, roads, power lines, communication towers, faces the next wave of challenges. Ash accumulates everywhere, and when wet, it becomes heavy enough to collapse roofs. Emergency response teams shovel, sweep, and clear, but every gust of wind sends the ash airborne again. It becomes a never-ending cycle. Clean, resettle, repeat. Power stations struggle because ash conducts electricity when wet, causing dangerous short circuits. Blackouts spread. Communication signals weaken. Transport systems slow to a crawl, and essential supplies, food, medication, clean water, become harder to deliver. In moments like these, the eruption's true impact reveals itself, not in the explosive force, but in the silent aftermath that tests human resilience. However, amid the difficulty, moments of extraordinary unity surface. Neighbors who barely exchanged greetings before begin working side by side. Farmers share whatever food they have left. Local volunteers distribute water and masks. Community halls transform into temporary shelters. Ordinary people become first responders, using simple tools, shovels, buckets, blankets, to fight back against nature's overwhelming power. Scientists continue to monitor the volcano obsessively, interpreting every tremor and gas reading. They must determine whether the eruption is declining or whether another violent episode is imminent. The emotional weight on their shoulders is immense. One misreading could decide the fate of thousands. and yet their dedication never wavers. They work sleepless nights, knowing that data, accuracy, and time are their only allies. Government agencies begin drafting long-term strategies, rebuilding homes, repairing infrastructure, restoring agriculture, evaluating economic losses that will likely take years to recover from. Aid organizations plan logistics to deliver essentials to remote areas blanketed under thick ash. International geological institutions offer support, sharing satellite readings and advanced analysis to better predict what the volcano may do next. But while the world watches, a deeper question emerges, one that challenges not just policymakers, but humanity as a whole. How do we coexist with forces so much larger than ourselves? Because volcanoes are not enemies. They are architects. They have built the continents, shaped the oceans, and created the very landscapes we admire. The soil for our crops, the minerals powering our technologies, and even the air we breathe are intricately tied to volcanic activity. Yet as much as they give, they can also take away. In this stage of the story, we witness a profound truth. Human beings are masters of adaptation. Throughout history, entire civilizations have endured eruptions far more violent than what modern societies have faced. They rebuilt, reimagined, and relearned how to survive on the edge of danger. And today, the people living near active volcanoes continue that legacy, not out of recklessness, but out of an understanding that every place on Earth carries both gifts and risks. As the days pass, small signs of renewal appear. Ash clears from rooftops, roads reopen, power grids stabilize, schools begin to prepare for reopening. Scientists report declining seismic activity, no guarantee of safety but a hopeful sign. Families cautiously return to their homes, sweeping pathways inch by inch. The landscape, although scarred, begins its slow transformation from catastrophe to recovery. This period, this delicate, fragile stage, is the turning point. It marks the moment when tragedy begins to shift into resilience, when people stop asking, "Why did this happen?" and start asking, "What comes next?" Even in the thick gray haze that lingers for weeks, a new determination emerges. A silent vow spreads through communities. We will rebuild. We will endure. We will rise from this. Yet even as the first signs of recovery appear, the true magnitude of what has happened begins to unfold in ways far more complex than cracked roads and ash-covered fields. A volcanic eruption does not simply destroy, it transforms. And in this transformation lies a deeper story, one that forces humanity to look inward, to reconsider the delicate balance between our ambitions and the natural world that sustains us. As the days turn into weeks, teams of volcanologists and environmental scientists begin the slow, meticulous process of analyzing the eruption's long-term consequences. Every layer of ash, every cooled lava flow, every seismic record becomes a piece of an intricate puzzle. They study the chemistry of the ash to understand its impact on soil fertility. They examine water quality to assess contamination levels. They map out new land formations created by the eruption, aware that nature has drawn new boundaries across the landscape without asking for permission. Their findings reveal a paradox. While ash disrupts life in the short term, it also enriches the soil in the long run. The very substance that now suffocates crops may one day become the reason those same lands flourish again. It is a cycle older than humanity, destruction giving birth to potential. And within that paradox, people begin to see the first glimmers of hope. Communities mobilize not just to rebuild, but to rethink. Houses are reconstructed using more resilient architectural designs, better suited to withstand future ashfall. Emergency response systems are upgraded with improved communication technologies, enabling faster alerts and coordinated evacuations. Schools incorporate disaster education into their curriculum, so children grow up understanding the power of the environment they live in. What once felt like a tragedy begins to shift into a lesson, a painful, unforgettable reminder that resilience is not merely about returning to normal, but about evolving into something stronger. This realization becomes even more profound when international teams arrive. Geologists, humanitarian organizations, climate researchers, each bringing expertise shaped by eruptions and disasters across the globe. They share knowledge, tools, and technology. They help rebuild monitoring stations, provide advanced imaging equipment, and train local scientists in cutting-edge analysis techniques. In these moments, the world feels smaller, unified by the shared recognition that nature's most powerful events transcend borders. Meanwhile, the volcano continues to breathe. It does not erupt again, but it exhales gas through fumaroles, quiet reminders that it is alive, awake, and still writing its story. Scientists approach these vents carefully, measuring heat, collecting samples, listening to the rhythms beneath the crust. These are the conversations humanity must have with the Earth, patient, humble, and attentive. And this is where the story deepens, not in devastation but in understanding. Because a volcano is not merely a mountain. It is a window into the Earth's memory. Within its chambers lie the origins of continents, oceans, minerals, and even the conditions that made life possible. To study a volcano is to study the forces that shaped every breath we take. When viewed this way, the eruption is not just a disaster. It is a message about fragility, a message about responsibility, a message about coexistence. In towns close to the eruption site, people gather for community meetings, not out of fear anymore, but out of determination. They discuss rebuilding strategies, agricultural recovery plans, and economic solutions. Local leaders work tirelessly to secure funding, restore markets, and restart trade. Farmers experiment with new planting techniques designed for volcanic soils. Students volunteer to help elderly residents clean damaged homes. Slowly, the fractured rhythm of life begins to reassemble itself. But perhaps the most profound change occurs in mindset. Before the eruption, the volcano was a distant presence, a distant silhouette on the horizon, majestic yet ignored. After the eruption, it becomes a character in the community's story, a reminder of nature's power and generosity. People speak about it with a mixture of fear, respect, and awe. They learn to read its moods, to understand its signals, to coexist with it as previous generations once did. This evolution in thinking marks the beginning of a new era for the region, not just in terms of infrastructure, but in collective awareness. It is the recognition that living near a volcano is not a matter of taming nature, but of aligning with it. Over time, vegetation begins to reclaim the landscape. Green shoots emerge through gray ash. In forests, small plants break through the surface, announcing the start of renewal. Rivers clear their waters, birds return. Life does what it has always done. It adapts, it persists, it reclaims. And as the community rebuilds, grief transforms into gratitude. Gratitude for survival, for unity, for the unbroken spirit that allowed them to rise above devastation. Gratitude for the scientists who provided warnings, for the workers who cleared roads, for the volunteers who delivered food and water. Gratitude for the reminder that even in chaos, humanity's greatest strength lies in coming together. But this story is not only about one eruption. It is about all of us. It is a reflection of a world where natural disasters are becoming more frequent, where climate shifts and environmental pressures amplify the consequences of events like this. It challenges global society to rethink preparation, resilience, and responsibility, because the truth is we cannot prevent volcanoes from erupting, but we can lessen the damage. We can improve early warning systems. We can invest in education, science, and sustainable development. We can learn from each event so that every community becomes safer than the last. As recovery accelerates and the region stabilizes, something remarkable begins to happen. What started as a moment of panic gradually transforms into a global conversation. Scientists, governments, environmental agencies, and millions of ordinary people find themselves asking the same question. What else lies beneath the surface of our planet that we are not paying attention to? And perhaps even more importantly, are we prepared for the next awakening? Because as the dust settles over the Afar Depression, one thing becomes undeniable. The eruption of Hayli Gubbi was not an isolated event. It was a symptom of something much larger, much deeper, much older than any of us. It was a reminder that the African continent is splitting apart, a tectonic transformation so massive it is literally reshaping the map of the world. And every tremor, every plume of ash, every molten surge of magma is part of a story unfolding beneath our feet. Volcanologists studying the aftermath begin connecting dots across the region. Tremors recorded hundreds of kilometers away show unusual patterns. Satellite interferometry reveals widening rifts, expanding fissures, and subtle shifts in ground elevation. Reports quietly circulating through global monitoring agencies indicate that several dormant volcanoes in the East African Rift have shown minor but noticeable changes in seismic signatures since the eruption. Individually, these signals might mean nothing. Together, they paint a picture that is impossible to ignore. The Earth is moving. The continent is stretching. The deep forces of creation, forces that once forged oceans and mountains, are stirring again. And for the first time in a long time, humanity is paying attention. In Ethiopia, public interest in earth sciences skyrockets. Young students dream of becoming volcanologists. Universities expand their geology programs. Local communities begin adopting new preparedness protocols, using the lessons learned from the eruption to strengthen their resilience. The country, once taken by surprise, is becoming one of the most vigilant regions in the world when it comes to monitoring geological change. But the true impact of the eruption extends far beyond Ethiopia's borders. Aviation authorities in the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia revised their flight route policies, recognizing the risks posed by large ash clouds drifting across continents. Emergency planning agencies in the Gulf begin studying East African seismic activity as part of their own climate and disaster forecasting. Even nations thousands of kilometers away, Pakistan, India, Turkey, update their atmospheric monitoring systems to track transcontinental ash particles with greater accuracy. This is what global interconnectedness looks like in the modern age. A volcano erupts in one corner of the world, and governments on the other side adjust their flight paths. A fissure opens in a remote desert, and laboratories across Europe reevaluate their geological risk models. A plume rises over Ethiopia, and millions of people, thousands of kilometers away, watch the sky with new awareness. Suddenly, the world understands something that geologists have been saying for decades. Volcanoes are not just local events. They are global announcements. And this eruption, after 12,000 silent years, delivered a message loud enough for the entire planet to hear. Yet amid this scientific and political awakening, the human story remains the most powerful. The people who lived closest to the volcano, the ones who felt the tremors, breathed the ash, fled with nothing but urgency in their hearts, carry memories that no research paper can fully capture. They remember the sound, the fear, the uncertainty, but they also remember the unity, the way neighbors helped neighbors, the way strangers became family, the way a community faced with nature's fury refused to crumble. Their resilience becomes a symbol, not of what was destroyed, but of what can be built. In the final weeks of recovery, as roads reopen and markets regain their energy, something unexpectedly beautiful happens. Tourists, journalists, and researchers begin to arrive, not with fear, but with curiosity. They want to understand the region that witnessed one of the most extraordinary geological events of our time. They want to see the land shaped by fire. They want to meet the people who survived it. And in those interactions, a new narrative emerges, not of tragedy, but of significance, not of fear, but of value. The region becomes not just a place where something catastrophic happened, but a place where the world can learn. And that is how every disaster becomes a turning point, when knowledge replaces fear and purpose replaces pain. As we reach the end of this story, one truth stands above all. The Hayli Gubbi eruption was not an ending. It was a beginning of renewed scientific focus, a beginning of stronger infrastructure, a beginning of global awareness about the East African rift, a beginning of conversations that humanity can no longer afford to postpone. And this is where the voiceover turns directly to the audience, because the story continues with them. If you are watching this video, it means you are part of a generation living through a changing planet. A planet that speaks through storms, through quakes, through rising seas, and yes, through volcanoes that awaken after 12 millennia of silence. And the question is no longer whether we will be affected, but whether we are prepared. So as this documentary closes, here is the message. Stay informed, stay curious, pay attention to the world beneath your feet, support science, support credible reporting, support climate and geological research, because every eruption teaches us something. Every tremor is a reminder. And every moment we spend learning is a moment that brings us one step closer to a safer future. The Earth is changing. The question is, will we change with it? If you found value in this investigation, share it. Spread awareness. Allow more people to understand what is happening under Africa, under all of us, and why scientists around the world are paying attention like never before. And remember, this is not just history. This is a preview of the planet we are stepping into.